Hi, and welcome to Toni Time. Well, we have our favorite family person here to talk about the birds this time of season, as you all know and remember, Ann Hastings. Ann, welcome to the show again.
Good morning, Toni. I'm delighted to be here.
It's great to have you here as always. And you know, our audience now, since it's getting a little cooler out, and a lot of people I know have bird feeders out to help the birds. So tell us, what is the winter? This isn't winter yet, but it's kind of.
Well, the 21st of December is coming up, and then it will be winter.
And then it will be
Snow
winter.
or not, yeah.
So there's been a lot of turkeys out all over, more than I remember last year.
Well, they seem to thrive. Their reintroduction is one of the true success stories of reintroduction of a species. You know, they pretty much had disappeared from whole parts of the country, and they were reintroduced here. They didn't just we were without them for a while, and one of the reasons they reintroduced them was so they could have a hunting season.
I know you've talked to me about this.
Well, I grew up in Freiburg, where people hunt, and it's part of everyday life. And everybody in my family thinks because I'm a vegetarian and I'm so into wildlife that I would wish it would be banned. I don't wish it would be banned. I just hope people would realize that it's probably not fun to be hunted and maybe think about it, but I don't think we should have laws against it. And it is, some people depend upon it for food.
Well, that I understand.
And that I understand also.
Yeah.
It's when people do it for sport that I think that there's something to think about. But everybody gets to have their own thoughts. This is America.
Well, I have such a problem driving down 9, and I see all the trucks parked off the street by the woods, and I know they're out there hunting, and I cringe.
Well, as long as they don't shoot around my house, and we put a little orange scarf on the dog.
Good.
So that she doesn't look like prey out there, and we just cross our fingers and hope we all survive.
Oh my goodness. Now, if you remember, Ann has at her house a feeding table in the back of the house for all the animals to come. So bring that up again for the people who are just watching and tuning in.
Well, we put food out, and people always want to know who we're feeding. Well, we're feeding whoever wants to come and eat it. We don't really care. We used to have a lot of fox and more raccoons. I think that they got a little bit put off by the fact that we have a dog running around and an electric fence not far away. Although I did see a fox the other night in the dark. I think that what they've done is adjust so they only come after dark. They used to be there during the day.
Yeah.
We have deer. But what we have in great abundance this time of year are turkeys. We have one group that is about 35 strong.
Really, that many?
Yep, and we have another group that comes with about 15, and then we have these 4 toms that run around, sometimes joining groups and sometimes being by themselves, but they're very full of themselves, so it's fun to watch them. And they're toms that were a group of jakes.
Okay, what's a jake?
A jake is a young male, not yet a tom. A tom is a mature male. And one of the things, and one of my hunter friends explained this to me, so I have to give him credit, that when they fan their tail out in a display, a tom, the center feathers are a couple inches longer, like the center 3 feathers, maybe the center 5 feathers. And you can tell it's a jake because the center feathers are longer. So it isn't a smooth fan, it has a little jut at the top.
Okay.
And so that's a jake. It's an immature male. And then this group of 4 that we've had, they've been running around as a group since they were jakes, and they've just turned into toms. So this fall, they shed those center feathers, and their new feathers grew in, and they're even. So now their fans are even, and that makes them toms. I actually have pictures of the different. I know it. It's a fun thing to watch because you get to see. You get to know a few of the turkeys, and you get to watch them grow up, and you get to watch them change their behavior. It's a fun thing to be able to have that kind of continuity with some animals.
Sure. Now, what is life expectancy?
You know, I don't really know. I don't really know what the life expectancy is. I do know they're loud.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many of them on West Street.
Well, it may be the same group because they roam around quite a bit. I always figure if I see a group, at least at the Route 9 end of West Street, they might be our turkeys wandering around. And other people put food out too that they can eat. And I think they're pretty well taken care of. The toms look like they're pretty big.
Well, from the video you showed me, my goodness, Ann just showed me a video of the turkeys in the backyard at the table eating. And all of a sudden, it was like a rush of ducks coming over the hill and coming down, and then the turkeys moved on.
The turkeys can stand up to the ducks, but not in the numbers that the ducks come in. There may be a couple hundred ducks, mostly mallards, some black ducks, and some hybrids. They're very closely related, black ducks and mallards. Periodically, Audubon changes its standards, and there was a period of time where they were considered the same species. Now they're considered separate. I read that they're thinking of making them the same species again. They have a little bit different behavior, though, because once everything freezes over and they're not in the ponds and the marsh so easily anymore, the black ducks are more commonly on the edge of the shore in the ocean, and the mallards are more likely to be out in the marsh, although you will see both of them both places. But we have at least a couple hundred, and one of the fun things is to watch for the hybrids, because you can tell them. There'll be a duck that looks like a mallard, but it's a male mallard, but its whole head won't be green, only part of it will be green, and you know that's a hybrid.
Okay, hybrid. What does that mean?
Means that the two of them, that a mallard and a black duck bred together.
Okay, so you call that a hybrid.
And they don't look fully like either one or the other. They look a little different. The females are harder to tell because they're harder to tell apart if they're not hybrids. But then when they're hybrids, it's mostly easy to tell the male hybrids. We also occasionally have interlopers that are ducks that usually would be further south, but they didn't either make it yet, or sometimes they stay the whole winter. A couple of winters ago, we had 2 or 3 northern pintails that stayed with the flock the entire winter. And a couple of years ago, too, it must have been 3 years ago, we had the pintails, and then 2 years ago we had a female wood duck that stayed with the flock for the entire winter. And I worried she wouldn't get a mate, but a mate showed up and found her.
That's because she wasn't looking, and they just showed up.
Well, they mate usually in the winter, actually.
How do you know all this?
Well, they pair up. They don't actually mate. They pair up in the winter, and I read about them. And then they're already paired, the ones that migrate, often when they come. I'm sure some pair later, but many of them pair in their winter feeding grounds in further south. And when they come up, they're already a pair.
Wow. Wow. So now, well, what I wanted to bring up to you, West Street, driving down West Street, and hopefully the people who live in that house will probably know what I'm talking about. There is a duck on the front lawn by himself or herself, just sitting there. And Ann and I got together 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, for breakfast, and I'm telling her, I'm saying, Ann, you've got to drive down the street. You've got to go look at it. Tell me about it. And I went back, the duck was gone. Then yesterday, the duck was back in the front yard, sitting there. So you're telling me that it's a feral duck?
Yeah, it's a duck that's not, let's see if it's in the book. I'm going to take a little look here. I didn't have it marked. I'm blocking the name at the moment. I told you immediately what it was.
You did, and it's a domestic and a feral, which means, I'm just checking.
It's a Muscovy duck. And let's see, they have them in here. Let's see what it says about them. Muscovy. See, they're in the back.
Yeah.
Where the ones that are either rare or that there's something unusual about them. Mm-hmm. But I just...
Yeah, I mean, I drive by there, it's all by itself, and just sitting there. And I mean, the people who live in that house...
Oh, this is it.
Oh.
Except it doesn't have as much red on it as many of them do.
Here.
It's this duck right here, but most of the ones we see have more white and more red on them, and it's a...
yeah, this one has more white and red.
They usually have red, fleshy red flesh around their faces and some white. This one happened that they're showing here is mostly black, but the ones I see are not mostly black. You usually just see small groups of them.
Right.
And I think that they're considered feral ducks because they're not native to this area or even this country, I don't think. But people raise them in domestic flocks, and then some of them take off and they become feral domestic ducks for this area.
Okay, feral ducks, that means they're out in the wild. They lived in a domestic environment.
Yep.
They took off, and they just went to every bar and just got wild, right?
Well, it's sort of like that. It's that they're originally wild ducks in their native environment. They not really belong here, but people wanted to have them, and so they'd raise them here where they don't really belong in domestic flocks, and then some of them escape. It's not unlike what happens to parakeets in parts of our country where we ordinarily wouldn't have them. They have flocks of parakeets in places like Texas and Florida because they escape and they find an environment that is manageable for them, and they breed, and then they become more or less feral. But they're there long enough, they start to treat them like they're a wild flock. But feral usually means that a domestic bird that's become wild.
Okay. I didn't know about the parakeets.
Oh, yeah.
Texas?
I think so. I know in Florida there certainly are parakeets that you can find. I've seen them down there.
Really?
And parrots, yeah, some sorts, yep. Although I did hear recently that some of the flocks had died off. They're not really suited to the environment. If they have an unusually cold snap, it might be really detrimental to them. But they escape from captivity, or they're set free. I mean, that's why some of the most common birds we have aren't native to here, and people either liked them or thought they would fit into the ecosystem in some interesting way and let them go, like starlings. They're one of the most common birds we have. You see the huge flocks of the dark birds that fly around the marsh. Yeah. Those are starlings. They're a European bird that aren't native to here, but people let them go, and they're a hugely successful breeding bird. And they're everywhere now, and they're treated as a wild bird now, but they weren't native to this environment. Another one is the house sparrows, that we also have a lot of them. They're the ones that have, the males are a very handsome bird with gray on their heads, and you see them a lot down by around the pool. There's a lot of them, and a lot of people hate them because they nest in the bluebird boxes and the swallow boxes, the boxes that they put up meaning for bluebirds and swallows. But the house sparrows are kind of aggressive, and so they get them and then they squeeze other species out, and they also are not native to this country at all. Just people wanted them to be part of our environment, and they let them out, and they're very successful breeders, and they spread everywhere.
Well, they sound like a very strong breed.
Yeah, so, yeah, and if they're more dominant than other species, sometimes they push other species out. The starlings are cavity nesters, and there's only so many cavities, and so some people think that they push other birds out. And they will nest in boxes, but not so much the bluebird boxes. They need a little bit bigger hole.
All right, you're talking cavity.
Cavity, or a hole in a tree.
Okay.
Or a box.
Yeah.
A box is an artificial cavity, a bird box.
Okay, all right. Even though I have a fear of birds, I want to know this, because Anne knows you need to know your enemy. So I pick her brain all the time to know what they're going to do, where they are, who are they talking to.
You need to watch out for the starlings. There are hundreds of them in flocks. But I've not known them to ever attack people, but there is that movie, The Birds. You have to watch it.
Okay, Anne, love you too.
Well, since you were going to bring it up.
Well, yeah, I know. So now, see, I find this just fascinating. And I know the audience. I mean, there's so many bird watchers out there.
Well, our regular winter birds are arriving back, the ones that go up north to breed. So we have all our buffleheads back. If you look
noticed that.
Peter Pond and places like that, you see a lot of them right now. Once that freeze over, they'll go out into the ocean. We have two kinds of grebes. We have three kinds of, which is a small bird that's a water bird in the ocean, but not a duck. And when they're here, they're gray and white. When they're in breeding plumage, and they don't breed here, they're much prettier, but we just have them in the winter when they're kind of bland looking, but we love them. We have 3 kinds of scotas. Those are ducks. They're basically a black duck with varying patterns of little white spots and orange bills. And we have the loons, the common loons, but they don't have their breeding plumage on, so they don't look like all the pictures that you see. They're just gray and white. And then we actually have another kind of loon. I've mentioned them before, the red-throated loon, which doesn't breed here at all, although we saw them breeding in Iceland. We were very excited. I'd always wanted to see that. A year and a half ago, we were there in the spring, and they were in their breeding plumage. They're a more elegant, delicate loon, and they always hold their bill up in the air like their nose is in the air, and that's one of the ways you tell them. We have our eider, common eider, the black and white duck, year-round. We have mallards and black ducks year-round. I haven't seen a goldeneye, but we should have the goldeneye here for the winter. We have a lot of winter ducks, but they don't breed here. So when they arrive, they come back mostly in force in November, some a little bit earlier, some a little bit later, but mostly in November. The cormorants that we have everywhere leave and go south. In fact, many of the big V formations you see in the sky are really cormorants and not geese, although there are lots of geese. But if they're not honking loudly, they might be cormorants. But we have another kind of cormorant, the great cormorant, that comes here in the winter, not in the same kind of abundance. They have a little bit of white around their beaks, and they're a little bit larger, but they are here only in the winter, and then they go north to breed. We have lots of birds that come, but one of the most interesting things I have seen recently happened in the recent windstorm.
Oh, really? Okay.
There are a whole category of birds called pelagic birds, and those are birds that only come to shore to breed. The rest of their lives, they spend their entire life on the ocean. They never come to shore except when they nest. And there is a kind of bird that you rarely see near the shore called a gannet. It's a great big bird. People see them out when they're out on the ocean in boats all the time. It's called the northern gannet. It's really, let's see, how big is it here? Usually says down here, its wingspan is 5.5 feet. Its length is up to 3.5 feet. They're a big bird, but when the wind comes towards the shore, they come in close to shore, and you can see them. They have these great flat wings, and they're white with black wingtips, and they're beautiful. And they dive like a missile going down into the water. They pull their wings in, and they just dive like a missile. And I just recently saw a show on them, and they can go 15 or 16 feet into the water. And then they come up and they fly. And usually you see a few in the far distance, and they occasionally dive, which is so dramatic. But during the windstorm, we were driving along Fortune's Rock Beach, and we saw a flock of maybe at least 50 of them, and they must have found a school of fish, because we saw about 15 or 20 of them dive once right into the water. It was so dramatic. And so that when the wind is coming in, and this is year-round, I believe, when the wind is coming in towards the shore, it's a good thing to look and see if you see these big soaring birds, white birds with black wingtips that fly with their wings very flat and then dive into the water. It's so dramatic to see them dive. They're amazing. You probably have heard mention of boobies. They're a bird that makes everybody laugh. They're closely related to boobies. They're not boobies, but they're a lot like them.
But aren't they in the Caribbean, the boobies?
So they're at the Galapagos. They have 3 kinds of boobies.
Oh my God.
Someday I'll like to go there and see them. I've never seen them.
Wow, that is just...
It's a really dramatic thing, and many people who live here who are familiar with going out in boats, with the birds that come and circle around boats, are familiar with gannets, but they don't know that they come near the shore, and they don't on a regular basis. But when the wind is right, you can see them, and these you could see clearly without even binoculars. It was so dramatic, and to see a whole large group of them dive at once just took my breath away. I couldn't believe it. I never had seen such a thing before.
Yeah, that many. Oh my goodness.
You know, and we should mention the gulls. We do have 2 or 3 kinds of gulls that winter
We
here.
do. And Wood Island Lighthouse, okay.
Yes.
I mean, I can't go out there until the season's over because of my fear of birds. And the stories I hear about the seagulls dive bombing and protecting their nests and all that, I would die.
You wouldn't die, but you'd probably think you were gonna.
Well, yeah, true. So talk about the gulls. I mean,
Well, you know, I really only started to be interested in the breeding over there recently. And so last summer, I started to go out every week and set up my scope and see if I could see the babies. And I could see the babies, at least for a while. I wasn't around in August.
you went out to Wood Island.
No, I did it from East Point with a
Did
scope.
you? Okay.
I must say the little gull babies, it's the greater black-backed gulls, I think, that I was looking at. They are the cutest little gray things, and they run around. They're about this big. The greater black-backed gull is a big gull.
Yeah.
They're the ones with the, let's see if I can find them. They're the ones, I didn't mark them, but I can find them, no problem. They have all black wings.
Yeah.
The other ones that we have in the winter have gray wings, so they stand out quite different.
Well, I've heard stories from Sherry about the black seagulls, that they're a little more vicious.
Well, they're just big, and they're great black. 253. They're high on the food chain. I've watched the gulls. I mean, that's one of the things that breaks your heart, is to watch them just pick up and swallow a duckling, which they do, and it just really upset me.
Yeah.
But the great black-backed gull is a very big gull. It's down here. It also has a wingspan of almost as much as the gannet. It can be almost 3 feet tall. It's got a little red dot on its bill. It's got pink legs, that's one thing, but it's the black wings that you really notice. That's one of the ones that we have year-round, and they're really at the top of the food chain.
Yeah.
I believe we also have herring gulls in the winter.
Herring gulls?
Herring gulls, yes. We have glaucous gulls.
Those I see all the time, don't I?
They have gray wings. They're
Yeah.
not as big. They also have a red dot, and they are here in the winter. Some gulls are here in the winter, and some are not. There's only 3 or 4 that are here in the winter. I actually am not as good as I should be on gulls. I've not spent as much time studying them. It's one of the areas I want to get better on. One of the tricky things about gulls is that many of them take 3 or 4 years to mature into their full adult plumage, and every year they have a different plumage. And so it can be very tricky to identify them when they're immature. But we have gulls, and they're so hardy. They spend their winters out on the beach when we're all freezing. They all stand around, and they seem to be pretty happy out there. I don't know how they do it. It blows me away that these birds live outside. I think I've told you that before, that all the birds, whether it's the great big gulls or the little teeny chickadees.
Now, I found, okay, the pulvers. Pulver? Am I saying that correctly? The birds that you protect in spring on the beach.
The plovers.
Plovers.
Plovers. People say it differently, but yeah, the piping plovers.
Okay, now, are they here all year round?
No, but they're a very early arriver in spring, but no, they're long gone. And I always think, and they're among what they call the shorebirds, is a category. And the shorebirds, they hang out and take care of they don't feed their babies, they just sort of oversee them and supervise them. And then once the babies are pretty well grown, mom and dad just take off. And, and that's true. A lot of the shorebirds also breed further north, and they do that. That's exactly what they do, is some of them start to migrate south as early as the end of July.
There's little birds now on the beach.
Yep, those are the last of the migrators, and they're what they call peeps. That's a category. They're likely to be least sandpipers or semi-palmated sandpipers, sanderlings, and not piping plovers, semi-palmated plovers. The piping plovers are pretty much long gone. But the piping plovers breed here, so they're gone. The birds that you're seeing are coming south from further north where they were bred. And these are usually the immatures because mom and dad left.
Wow.
But these are the trailers. These are the last ones arriving, except that we do have one shorebird that is here in the winter. You don't usually see them without binoculars because they don't go on the shore. They're on the rocks usually. When the tide goes out, they're on the rocks. They're called purple sandpipers.
All right.
And they are further north in the summer.
Because whatever is on the beach now, and I go down there with the dogs, and my goodness, it's like they play with dogs.
Well, I think they're just trying to stay out of the way, but they're really quick.
They're very quick, and there'll be a group of them that will just go up and down, and the dogs are just running and circling. And then they go further, and then the dog, totally forgets about it.
Well, they're just trying to feed. They're trying to get food so they can continue on their long trip. And it probably looks like play, but I don't think it's play to the birds. But they are pretty quick, and they can stay out of the way. It's good, actually, if you can keep the dogs from chasing them. But I haven't been able to keep my dog from chasing them. She thinks birds are wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
But we have one, the purple sandpiper, which is a plump little bird, that if you were looking out at, say, the island off of Ocean Avenue, the one that's directly out there, that's white, that has always the old lobster pots on it.
Yeah.
You'll see sometimes whole flocks of them in the winter flying from rock to rock. They feed right on the rocks and you'll see them feeding, and they'll go down to the edge of the rock near the water, and then a wave will come and they'll scurry back up.
Yeah.
And they scurry back down. But they're here for the winter. That one shorebird lives here for the winter. Otherwise, all the other shorebirds go south. And if you see them on the beach, they're just late migrators, and you hope they're going to make it at this time of year.
Right, exactly. Well, I did notice the snowy white owl is back.
Yes, there's a beautiful snowy owl.
Yeah.
And it was an adult, and it didn't have very much black on it. So that tells us it's an adult. The one that we saw looks just about like that, and it was on Miles Stretch, and they like to sit on the houses, particularly on Miles Stretch. The males are sometimes almost pure white. If I had to guess, I'd say that's a picture of a female adult. The darker ones are juveniles. The very darkest are juvenile females. They can be hard to be sure which is which, but the males are supposed to be nearly pure white, but sometimes they do have little flecks of gray on them. But this owl I was watching had all these people around it. Sometimes I feel a little bad about that. It's a wild animal trying to make its way, and it has all these people. And sometimes people are screaming at each other and yelling at each other. And it would be good if people were quiet and respectful around it and not too intrusive, because it's made a long trip to get down here, and it's
now,
just trying to get by.
Where exactly did it come from?
Well, let's look at where their range is, because it'll show right here. It's the northern tundra. You can see on this picture of North America, the very northernmost reaches where it's pink. That's where they breed. The yellow part is where they migrate, and the blue part is where they spend the winter. But they will come down the East Coast, and we're lucky enough to get them some. But they breed really up in the Arctic, and where there are, as I've said this before, if you're looking for them, look on the tops of houses, because that's where you'll most likely find them. There are no trees where they breed, and they're not accustomed to trees. And once in a while, there will be one that sits in a tree, but as a rule, they don't like trees because they're not natural to their environment. Houses may not be either, but it probably is more like a big rock than a tree is.
True. Because the one I saw last week was sitting on a large piece of wood. Driftwood, but it was a large one, and just sitting looking out at the water.
Well, and sometimes you see them on telephone poles, and they're
Yeah, I've seen them on telephone poles.
they eat vermin. So most often you see them in a place where they can see a marshy, grassy area, and they're looking for mice or any other kind of vermin that live there. And sometimes they will eat fish if they're near the surface. They don't dive, unlike the gannet.
Yeah.
If they can grab it on the surface, they will. And they will go after ducks sometimes too. I've seen them with ducks. They're hungry. That's why they're down here, is to get food.
Yeah.
And but they usually will sit someplace, whether it's a natural object like a piece of driftwood or a little. It's usually some sort of a pole, or sometimes you'll see them on the Rachel Carson signs.
Yeah, true.
You know, something that's a firm. They're a pretty big bird, and they're not going to sit on a bush.
No.
Because they're too big.
And too heavy, probably.
And too heavy, yeah. So you see them, they're looking for a vantage point, and they're just looking for prey, and they're really quick. They're beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always amazed if they're sitting up on a house, how can they see their prey?
Oh, they have great vision, and they have great hearing, and they can see the movement, and they will swoop down. And they fly without making noise.
Oh, really?
Owls do, as a general rule. They're able to fly without making much noise, and that way they can move quickly and grab prey before the prey knows they're there.
It's amazing.
It is amazing, and they're one of the few owls that will hunt during the day. Most owls don't, but they live the rest of the year they live in a part of the world where it's either all dark or all day.
Yeah.
Because they're way at the pole. So that if they didn't hunt during the day, they'd starve. So they're unlike owls down here. They don't find it unnatural to hunt during the day, and that's why we get to see them.
That's great.
What a privilege, really.
Never knew all this. And wow. I mean, I see them. Last year, I didn't see any.
I don't know if I saw any last year.
But this year, when I saw that first one, I thought, wow, they're coming back.
Yeah, well, some years they call them, when there are a zillion of them, they call them eruptions. But I don't know if we're going to have an eruption this year. There was that year where people were seeing routinely multiple. Well, I remember that one year I could almost always find 3 or 4 anytime I went in the pool.
Yeah.
And I remember standing on a spot out on East Point with a scope and being able, well, just by spinning the scope around, see 3 or 4 without moving.
Wow.
Because sometimes, I mean, my favorite spot, I think, ever of seeing a snowy was on one of the spires of Marie Joseph. It was just sitting
Oh,
up
that
there.
would be.
It was a spectacular thing. I was so surprised I didn't expect to see it there. And
Yeah.
I was up on Ocean Avenue, but around the corner at South Point, and looking, just scanning to see what I could see. And I saw this snowy owl sitting on one of the spires. And then there's that big rock cone on the other side of the pool out in the bay towards Old Orchard. That
Yes.
I saw one sitting on that once. When there are lots of them, they're just looking for high vantage points in order to observe prey.
It's so interesting.
Well,
All animals have their way and habitat and what they do, but I mean, the snowy white owl is always that one. We never have it up here. When it's up here, it's amazing.
it is amazing. I love even the Canada geese.
Yeah.
And whenever I hear someone say they've invaded my yard, I always want to say, so exactly who invaded whose yard?
Yeah.
We really, a lot of birds die because they hit buildings and cities when they're migrating. A lot of birds die because of cats outside in feeding areas. And if we don't find ways to accommodate this wildlife, we'll lose it. And who would want that?
No.
I mean, they were here before us.
Oh, yeah.
At least before we were here in such numbers and before we built big houses everywhere.
Well, yeah, we've interfered in their world, in their life. I mean, driving down the street, you see a lot of the roadkill, and they don't know that's a road. They're just walking in the woods, and they just keep walking. What's this car doing coming?
Yeah,
So we've kind of invaded their world.
Well, and the big group of turkeys left the feeding table the other day, and they went running off towards the road, and in a few minutes I heard a car sort of screech to a halt and honk its horn. I thought, I hope they all get across.
Yeah,
Because when
yeah.
there are 30 of them or 35 of them, and you know they're probably going in a big line across the road, that's a long,
Yeah.
you hope they all get across.
Wow.
But they can fly, and I've had a turkey take off and fly right over my windshield, and it's a pretty impressive thing. They're so big.
Oh my goodness, right?
Yeah, just make it over the hood of my car while I was driving. I've had that happen once or twice, and it's a little bit scary. I didn't hit it, but it was startled, and it just took off. And for a minute, I didn't know what it was. I hadn't really had that sensation before, and it was very startling because they're big birds.
They're big.
But they can fly as much as a mile, the book says.
Really? Now at night they sleep up in trees, right?
They do, and it's the weirdest thing because they go way up at the top where the branches are thin, and they rock around until they can settle down because they got these big bodies and they got to get them balanced, right? And they look awkward and like it's the wrong place for them, but it's the safest place for them. And I worried about them during the windstorm because I didn't see how they could sleep up in the trees during the windstorm, but they're still around and they made it through.
Wow.
And one of the interesting critters that has been through my yard lately is I saw my first bobcat this year.
Really?
I know they're around, but I had never seen one. And I looked out. If you ever visit me at my house, I spend a lot of time just glancing out the window because
Yeah.
that's how I see things. And I was just looking out the kitchen window, and this bobcat came and crouched behind the feeding table. There was nothing there, but it was stalking the ducks, which were on Ice House Road behind the feeding table, and they were congregated there. And I watched it move around my yard and sort of head up there. I couldn't actually see the ducks too well, and I don't know if it got one, but I had never seen one. I just knew
Are they
were
big?
there. No, they're probably not as big as your dogs.
Oh, okay.
And they're actually kind of a small cat, but they're probably 25 or 30 pounds, 25 pounds maybe.
All right. Wow.
But they're all muscle, and I don't think you'd want to meet one.
No, I don't think I'd want to meet one either. No, no. We're running out of time. Can you
Well.
believe our time goes so quickly?
We always have a good time.
We always have a good time. You know what I was thinking when you were talking? I can say this now because when you were talking about like 20, 50 ducks dive bombing, gannets dive bombing, and you said it was so impressive. You know what I thought of? The Rockettes.
I think the Rockettes probably learned from the Gannets, not the other way around.
I'm thinking, well, a group of anything is really impressive. And you're talking, and I'm thinking, the Rockettes.
I saw them when I was young. My uncle
did
took
you?
me.
There, you get 30 people in a row doing a kick line. It's impressive. You get 30
Gannets.
Gannets.
They're water birds, but they're not ducks.
Right. So they just,
It was beautiful. It looked like a coordinated effort. It was beautiful. I'd never seen so many dive all at once. And then to find out from the TV show that they could go up to 15 feet into the water, all I could think of is there must have been a school of fish there because they all were diving in the same area.
why would you do that unless there was a reason for it? Because all their eye makeup would run.
That's right. I knew you would understand.
I
Toni.
understand. And we have to have you come back sooner than we did before because it was so busy. And you've been so busy running around. But it's such a joy to have you on the show. It really is.
I always enjoy my time with you.
I mean, we have a ball.
We do.
And I think these things, and Anne is trying to educate me, which I want her to.
Sorta.
Well, I do. I want to know. So when you're on the show and we have the audience watching, it's so much fun.
It is really fun.
So thank you again.
You're welcome, and I'll come back if you ask.
Always, always. And I want to thank the audience for watching our show today, and have a good week. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.